It is Wednesday, February 12th. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick in for Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Everyone has a right to a good meal and a warm bed, no matter what time of year. But it's even more urgent during the coldest days and nights of winter. So it's time to check in with shelters and food banks, see how they're faring this season. Joining me in the studio today are Tina Bishop, General Manager of the Community Food Sharing Association. Hello.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Rudy Singleton is Chairperson of Emmaus House Food Bank. Hello, Rudy.
Hi, Jamie, and thanks for the invitation.
Paul Davis, Executive Director of The Gathering Place. Thanks for coming in.
Nice to see you, Jamie.
And also we have Mohammed Abdallah, whose name I almost crossed out, but you made it here just inside the deadline. Executive Director, Connections for Seniors. Thanks a lot for dropping in today.
Thank you.
Move in a
Thank
little.
you.
There we go. We got a busy show coming up. We have call-outs to various people as well as we check in with food banks and shelters. If you want to join the conversation, please do. You can text us at 709-327-8206. You can send an email to thesignal@cbc.ca, or you can leave us a voicemail at 709-576-5260. So, Paul Davis, I'm going to start with you. I guess when you turn in every night and get up every morning, it must be very, as man who runs the Gathering Place, it must be very high on your mind how chilly it is outside for people who are out there.
Absolutely, especially this time of year. And every morning when I wake up, I think about what went on over the night, how guests and staff made out, or what's taken place. And one of the benefits that I have personally from working at the Gathering Place is the opportunity to every day reflect on how privileged I am. And every one of us around this table are privileged in so many ways that we don't often appreciate, or that society quite often doesn't appreciate.
How many shelter beds do you have at the Gathering Place?
We have 40 now. We had 30 in a temporary shelter until the end of October. Since 2021, we were converting the former Mercy Convent into a new housing facility known as Mercy House, and within that is O'Callahan's Haven, which is now a 40-bed shelter, and it's full every night.
I often think about this as well. I don't know if it's anybody's job or if anyone takes it upon themselves to just drive the streets at night and see if there's someone out there who's really in a rough spot, because these could be life-threatening conditions, right?
Yeah, we do. We don't have anyone who does. Like Thrive, for example, does a lot of outreach on the streets, especially in the downtown area. But there are nights when our shelter is filled up and someone would show up at the door with no place to stay, and then our staff would work with them through Newfoundland Labrador housing line to see if there's a vacancy within the shelter system within the area. And most times, recently there has been, especially over the last few weeks when it's been cold outside, but we're also prepared then to go into an overcapacity circumstance through an agreement we have with housing where we can set up an extra cot. One time when our temporary shelter first opened in 2020, in the fall of 2020, that's all we had was cots that people would sleep in night after night after night. Now we're fortunate enough to have comfortable beds, but we also still have those cots if we have to go into overcapacity. So we're in a position that if someone did show up and there's nowhere else for them to go, we can set up a cot for them within the building.
Tina Bishop, Community Food Sharing Association. We're all, I think many of us in the community, familiar with the Food Sharing Association. But for people who don't know exactly what your mandate is and what you do, what is the job and what's your relationship with various food banks around town?
Well, the Community Food Sharing Association is the provincial association for food banks throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. Currently, we have 60 member food banks that we support with food. And those food banks actually serve more than 15,000 individuals on a regular monthly basis. Okay.
What's it been like this winter? Do you generally keep track of trends over the seasons and over the years?
Well, over the years, we're seeing, since COVID, really, we're seeing the numbers are consistently increasing, and that hasn't leveled off even to today. Food banks are reporting that their numbers are increasing every month. they're struggling to be able to support the number of clients coming through the doors. So, we're there to support them. And certainly, if any food bank is struggling right now, if we can offer any support, we're just a phone call away, and we'd be happy to help with food in any way.
Rudy Singleton, so Emmaus House is one of the food banks in St. John's, and I would venture a guess that, like every other food bank, you guys are seeing more demand with each passing year.
Absolutely, Jamie. I have some statistics from 2024, and from this past January, we're seeing a trend, an increase in the number. For example, in the month of January, we registered 25 new clients, which is quite high. We had a total of 365 visits, which works out to about 20 visits per day. And in addition to the numbers, Jamie, the complexities of some of the presentations at our door are becoming more and more, I won't say bothersome, but more and more challenging.
Can you elaborate a little bit? What do you mean by complexities?
Well, we have, for example, a young person, an 18-year-old, comes to the door, and when we call community food sharing, who coordinates informs us of the eligibility of people for hampers in a timeline, and we find a 19-year-old who has no fixed address, or where we have a family, the husband and wife are both working, and they can't meet their everyday expenses. And then we have other situations where the people who come to us probably need the services of some other agencies in terms of mental health or addictions.
Right.
So it's complex, but rewarding, I might add.
Mohammed Abdallah, with Connections for Seniors, is it the case that you've recently opened a new facility?
It's true, yes. So we increased our shelter capacity. We added extra 16 beds to the 14 that we had. Those 16 supposed to be 35 by April. Since we started our shelter program in January 2018, we have been full since then. And we're seeing a lot of seniors falling through the cracks, experiencing unpleasant experiences staying in intergenerational setups with other age groups, which can put them in a lot of risk. So we just opened our housing center, which is going to be more wraparound service around housing. So focused more on getting seniors out of the shelter system, focusing more on preventing homelessness in the first place. We're starting with 16 beds attached to that, and they're going to be 35, so roughly about 50 beds altogether.
Okay. I want to ask you a little more about that as we go on. Sure. Right now, we're going to have a chat with Pam Goodyear, who's with the Salvation Army Atlantic Regions, to talk about what the situation is like at their food banks and shelters this winter. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jamie.
What are you seeing at the shelters at this time of year? And I wonder, does it represent any kind of a pattern or a difference from previous seasons or previous years?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing, like others, that we're at capacity all the time. There's pretty much never an empty bed. One of the things we are noting is we're getting calls in St. John's from other communities around the province and people looking for a bed. And unfortunately, we're having to say, we don't have any availability. And as was mentioned, on some of these extreme weather days, and people are showing up and having nowhere to go. So we're working with the housing line to ensure that they've got somewhere, and certainly not turning anybody away out into the cold.
So you have to have, I guess, as similar to what Paul Davis was talking about at the gathering place, you have to have a backup plan if your shelter is full, but somebody needs a place to be indoors overnight.
That's correct. And one of the things we're seeing that's different for us, I'm not sure about the other shelters in St. John's, but certainly even other Salvation Army shelters across the country, normally an emergency bed means you're out at 8 in the morning after, a quick breakfast, and you're not back in until the evening. Here in St. John's, our Wiseman Center, folks are able to stay throughout the day. They're provided with 3 meals during the day. So it's a little different than some other emergency shelters and gives people a place to be in, out of the cold. But yeah, on any day once we pass September, you don't want to think about anybody having to be sleeping out on the street.
What are the shelves looking like, and how busy is it at the food bank?
The food bank continues to see an increase in families that are coming to us looking for assistance. As was already noted, a lot of new families, people who've never had to access a food bank before, that's over 50% in Atlantic Canada are new clients to using food banks. So that tells us something about how much people are really struggling.
Okay. Thanks so much for being on the line with us today and giving us a profile of where you're at this time of year. That is Pam Goodyear. She's with the Salvation Army Atlantic Regions. Tina Bishop, I guess one of the things that's on your mind day to day and week to week is what kind of shape are you in terms of demand versus your capacity? How are the shelves at the food banks in the metro region and around the province, do you think?
Well, like I said, with the demand up, the food banks are finding it more and more difficult to be able to provide food to individuals coming to their door. However, they certainly source enough food to be able to meet the demand. And anytime, like I said, if they're short of food or if there's anything that we can do for them, we're just a phone call away. So we would never want to see a food bank run out of food and not be able to serve the clients. We're there to support them. So.
Do you have most of the resources you need at the Food Sharing Association in terms of helping out food banks?
We do right now. We are in a good position right now. We had a very successful holiday season with lots of food and financial donations. So we are in a good position right now to be able to help out the food banks.
Rudy, I was speaking to you earlier about the volunteer work you do at Emmaus House, and you were talking just before about the different people that you see coming to the food bank. It's tough on them. Not everybody, nobody wants to be in that position. And it can be, I imagine for some people, it's hard to just bring themselves to the decision that they need the food bank, and just showing up at the door is a big decision for them.
Absolutely, Jamie. And at Emmaus House, we're of the mind that people who are coming to our food bank would rather not have to come to our food bank. Their dignity has been diminished to a great degree. And that's why we treat people and meet people with the utmost respect. Because if they're coming to a food bank and to help to provide food for their families in the short term, it must be very difficult on caregivers.
Right. Paul Davis, I don't know if it's possible to give a kind of concise answer to this question, but do you have can you give us an idea of a profile of what your clients look like, who they are, where they're coming from?
You're right.
You can't nail that down.
No, because they're representative of our community. They're as broad-ranging from backgrounds, education, where they come from. They're as broad-ranging as you would find anywhere in the community. Like at the Gathering Place, our shelter guests is a very small percentage of the number of people who come to the Gathering Place on a daily basis. We're serving now, on an average, just below 600 meals a day, and we serve meals 7 days a week. Where our shelter operation has 40 beds, so obviously there's a lot more guests who come to us for services. They come to get a shower. You asked me earlier about waking up in the morning, and I quite often think, I get out of my nice, warm, clean, safe, comfortable bed, and I go to my nice, clean washroom where I've got a nice, clean toilet and a nice, clean shower and so on. And I go to my closet, what am I going to wear today, and so on. Get a cup of coffee, watch the sports news. And then, of course, you start your car, because heaven forbid we get in a cold car before you drive to work in the morning. And people who come to Gathering Place don't have any of that quite often, even starting with that warm, safe, comfortable bed. And that's the majority of people who come there. They come for those other services as well. Do their laundry, meet with their friends. Case management services. We have a full team of case managers who some are focused on housing and finding housing solutions, but others are focused on, what that guest needs to try and sort through day-to-day life. As I mentioned earlier, there's so much that we take for granted, and we see it every day. But the community, we see ourselves as a community within the community, and in so many ways, our guests are reflective of that larger community.
When you mention housing solutions, that must be a real challenge. How successful are your caseworkers at getting some people located, and once they are located, how successful are they at sticking with it, shall we say?
So, and again, it varies depending on the individual and their own background and history and their own abilities, their mental health status, if they're dealing with addiction. Family complexities are quite often common with our guests as well. But now that others have opened, and Mohammed has got a great facility now for seniors down on Patrick Street, so that's relieved. Some of that population has gone from a shelter and a gathering place to transitional housing with Mohammed's operation. We're opening 5 new transitional beds before the end of this week ourselves, and our new facility also has 30 rooms that will be long-term supportive housing. So people who need those arm's length continued support to be able to function on a day-to-day basis, but not an emergency shelter or transitional, but in supportive housing. Those long-term beds will be opening in the coming weeks. In transitional, the way we've set up our new housing operation is, as you've already heard, the shelter system is an emergency overnight, and people are out of the shelter at 8, but they can stay within the gathering place throughout the day. In transitional housing, you'll be able to have access to your bed and your room throughout the day. And in transitional, we're also implementing, life skills programming. Help develop your own skills to understand how to better care for yourself and become a responsible person. Addictions counseling, and a broad range of those kinds of very what some would consider to be basic skill sets that would help develop and improve, with the goal of moving to supportive housing, which would be long term, or to moving out independently to the community. So it's kind of what we've created is kind of a continuum through the housing continuum from shelter to transitional to supportive housing, and hoping to give people a chance to build those skills to become independent. And of course, our whole community benefits from supporting individuals who are trying to get ahead. In many cases, Jamie, people who come to the gathering place were dealt a nasty hand, from the time of birth, and we should spend less time blaming them and more time accepting them and supporting them. We are all different, and that includes people at the gathering place. So I think that's basically our approach: treat people with respect and dignity, and to give them a chance.
I think the general assumption tends to be that people who land at the gathering place are people who have, among other things, serious problems with addictions, with drug addiction. And you've mentioned addiction treatment a couple of times. But is that an accurate assessment? Is that most of what you see? Addiction
and mental health are common, within the gathering place space. and quite often they come hand in hand. And as Rudy talked about earlier, the complexity is certainly increased. The demand for service, the number of individuals we see new people come to gathering place every day, but the complexity by the availability of drugs that are now available that weren't available historically or in years past, and the combination of drugs can certainly change the level of addiction likelihood. For people in the community. Something maybe is, some drugs are much more addictive than others, and having a supply or access to some of those more addictive drugs can create more complexities. But so it's not getting easier, and it's getting more difficult. But if you come to the gathering place, like during a meal service. Volunteers, we have a great staff. We also have a great team of volunteers. We have about 200 volunteers that are on our rolls right now, and they commonly will reflect on how often someone says thank you, or thanks for lunch today, thanks for that cup of coffee, thanks for the chat, thanks for that those words of support and encouragement. So those little things that many of us again take for granted are really important to other members of society.
Mohammed, when we were speaking earlier, you suggested that the part of the new facility that you're opening is dedicated to sort of helping people make a transition from a shelter situation to more permanent housing. Do I have that right?
Yes, partially correct. So we do provide services that is aiming for people not to come back to the shelter system again. In order to have the high success rate, there's two factors. You need to have a stock of housing, which we lack in St. John's specifically right now. Our vacancy rate is less than 1%. But with projects like the Gathering Place is doing for supportive housing, we are building now 60 affordable housing units downtown. Well, it's more like Water Street West, but it's closer to downtown. But it will make a little bit of a dent in the housing stock need in our community. I know there's roughly supposed to be like a few hundred of units coming in the next 3 years with some of the grants that came from Newfoundland Labrador Housing a year ago. So there's a lot that we're building in the community in order to avoid homelessness and to avoid housing crisis. People that come through doors don't have always a common denominator of what they are suffering from and what's the reason. Crisis is not selective; it can hit anybody at any time. There was a lot of statistics speaking about that we're only 2 paychecks away from losing not being able to meet our commitments. If you lose your job and you don't have a paycheck after a couple of weeks, you will actually suffer from homelessness and not being able to meet the basic needs of your lives. So the work that we're doing is aiming to provide a continuum of care, a wraparound service, which means when people come in, we see what they need in order to be able to have sustainable housing. Sometimes people are not ready to go to the market to live or don't have the ability to live on the market for various reasons. Sometimes addiction and mental health is a reason, but sometimes also basic life skills like Paul just mentioned earlier. And some other times there's a criminal history that happened 20 years ago, that there's a stigma in society that don't understand how to deal with that after a couple of decades of happening. These are actual stories, actually. Sometimes it's too expensive to live on the market, which is most common that we see for seniors. We have seen people that just retired from teaching in university and not able to pay the new landlord rent that they hiked because of the mortgage increase, and they can't pay the rent anymore with like 30 or 40% increase that happened in the last couple of years. It was really tough couple of years economically on everybody in society, including, I think, a lot of us around the table. We saw the difference. So the most vulnerable are suffering the most. They are seeing the increase, something that is increasing crisis in their life. We're trying to make this experience less traumatizing when they come in through the shelter door. We're trying to make it more effective. Speed is not the main goal to get them out, but it's also a goal so people can get out of that system in order to empty emergency beds. We have a problem now. We increased a lot of emergency response, but because we have a big emergency happening right now, there's a big crisis in our community due to the lack of housing. And the other piece is due to the services provided. Everybody's increasing their services. Any organization you ask now, they will tell you they expanded to double at some point in the last 5 years.
You're talking about any kind of services that they provide. They just need more.
Exactly. Services are needed because when people come through your door, there is nobody to help. The help is useless. So you need people to sit down and help them out. So the increase happened. Building a stock of housing and building a stock of solutions in regards to housing takes longer time, but it's happening as we're speaking. It's something that we're hoping to see in the next 2 years. But it's not enough still. We still need much more than that. And the problem that we're in that position of less than 1% vacancy is planning. We need to look forward to make it always at 4 to 5%, and that's not high enough. But to have that 5% of vacancy in our community so we don't face what we're facing today. People staying for a long time in shelters, not because of their needs, because there's nowhere for them to go. So it's something that we're definitely seeing now, and we're aiming to resolve by having that kind of programming, a wraparound service. You go into a building in regards to housing, once you're 55 plus, you can find that support anywhere within one place. And then in order to move out, we work with our partners equally. So whether it's our housing solutions, our supportive housing, traditional housing, or affordable housing, or any other organization, it will be something that we can work together in order to make sure that we house people as fast as we can and as efficient as we can.
Okay. Tina, at the Community Food Sharing Association, what does your budget or your revenue line look like? Where do you get government support? Is it primarily donations? How does that break down?
It is 100% donation based. So we really depend on the community, on our corporate sponsors, individual service groups. They're the ones that come together to help us do what we do. So.
And it sounds like you're pleased with the generosity of the community? You could always use more, I'm sure. But
well, you can always use more, and the more we had, the more food we'd be able to put out there for the food banks. But we're certainly, very grateful to our supporters, to, those that donate on a regular basis or individual donations. No donation is too small. That's what we keep telling people. Any donation, whether it's a can of soup or a loonie. A can of soup is a meal for someone tonight. So no donation is too small, and we certainly, would recommend that anyone who's able to go out and support your local food banks. There's members in your community that really need the help right now.
For your budget at the Food Sharing Association, can you give me a breakdown of what do you get in terms of corporate donations versus individuals? Do you know what that is?
I don't really have that breakdown, but the majority of our donations actually comes corporate, and I'd say it's probably about 70-30. We do have great corporate support with food donations and financial donations. So we're able to make that work to be able to provide food to the 60 food banks throughout the province.
Okay. Rudy, how do you keep food on the shelves at Emmaus House Food Bank? Where do the donations come from? Where does the money come from?
Well, if I may, Emmaus House originally began with two churches, the Anglican Cathedral and the Roman Catholic Basilica. It mushroomed out to 5 churches, and then there was realignment within both the Anglican and the Roman Catholic Archdiocese. So we're down to 3 churches. We get money, a designated amount, predetermined amount each month from each parish. That's our main source of money. And then, Jamie, it's really, really edifying the number of people who just drop off donations to us. It helps us immeasurably. When we get checks, and Tina referenced, no donation is too small, and we've gotten some that are $10, and we've gotten some that are $10,000. And our expenses are like those at the gathering place or at the Mohammed shelter. That our expenses they're all going in the same direction. They're going up, and happily we've been able to keep pace with the rising expenses to this point, and mainly too because we're in a building where we don't have to pay any rent or a nominal rent. Our building is owned by the Basilica Heritage Foundation, but we're hopeful, hope springs eternal, that we can continue to generate revenues that will help us meet our needs and fulfill our mandate.
Tina, both yourself and Rudy have driven home the point that any donation of any value is always welcome. But is it true what I've heard that if you had the choice, you'd happily take money over donations of actual canned goods and dried foods because the food banks know how to stretch a dollar better than anyone?
Well, we can certainly stretch our dollars more than you would as a consumer through our corporate sponsors and partnerships that we have in the community. We're able to make every $10 donation. We're able to source, purchase, and distribute up to $205 worth of food. So the donations certainly go a long way in helping us provide food to the community. Now, in saying that, we certainly need a good mixture of both financial and food donations. So it all comes together to be able to support food banks throughout the province.
A topic I want to turn to is something that Mohammed referenced just a minute ago. Paul, I guess I'll start with you. You mentioned that a lot of your clients are people who have been dealt a pretty tough hand right from the day they were born, and an awful lot of problems that they did nothing to bring upon themselves. At the same time, Mohammed mentioned that in some cases they're having to service seniors who, right up until they were into their 50s or 60s, they were working people with jobs, and now they find that whatever they have available in retirement is not enough. I think a lot of us tend to automatically see clients at a place like the Gathering Place or people who go to food banks and think it's kind of a separate class of people. Should we get used to the idea that, especially in difficult economic times, could be any one of us with a little couple of turns of bad luck?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I would imagine that anybody wouldn't have to reach too deep into their family tree to find someone who avails from services from any one of us around this table. And it gets more difficult since COVID and since we put our temporary shelter in, and as we started to get through the later stages of COVID, we had many people, seniors, women in their 70s, who arrived in our shelter for the first time ever in their lives, had to rely on a shelter, who may have been in a rental circumstance for 10, 15, 20 years. And all of a sudden, the demand for properties, as Mohammed has very well described, has gone up. Vacancy goes down, so the demand goes up. And the landlord comes in and says, look, you've been paying $600 a month for the last 10 years. You're a great tenant, but interest rates are gone up. I got bigger bills, and I got to increase your rent now to $1,000 a month. The person may only have $1,000 a month as revenue, and it's just not sustainable. And there was no other option. So we saw countless times, some and many who have ended up with Mohammed after coming to the Gathering Place and emergency shelter first. Like I said, women in their 70s who have all of a sudden they're homeless. It's not unusual, and it's more common than any of us like to see, but it is a reality that is faced in our community today. Can I make another comment as well about?
Sure.
You had a little just comment about revenue. The mail strike this fall impacted us as well. We had a 26% reduction year over year from 2023 compared to 2024 up to December 31st. We had a 26% reduction in donations come to the mail or walk-ins coming through our office. And we rely heavily, I quite often use the term, we can only operate as a result of the kindness of others. People who can help us help others is how we are able to operate. And the government, remind people, the government, and I checked with our MP just recently to see if it's been confirmed or not, that they've extended the deadline for charitable donations. So up to the end of February, someone who makes a charitable donation can be entered into their tax return for 2024 if it's in by the end of February. So that's something people think about who missed it out because of the mail strike, because it hurt us. There's no two ways about it. While demand and costs have gone up, we lost considerable revenue through that unfortunate time.
A lot of people kind of wonder if the old-fashioned postal service, the snail mail, has much of a use anymore, but organizations like yourselves and other charities really rely on it.
Absolutely. We receive donations from all around the province and out of the province, across the country. Expats who've got a family member who comes to the Gathering Place or know someone who used to come to the Gathering Place, wants to support us, understand what we're doing. And we had people call us and say, I'm not willing to give you my visa over the phone. I'm not online. I don't have access online. I don't use the internet. I have no other way to get my donation to you, because we receive a lot of donations from checks from people from outside the region. So, we lost out on a considerable amount because of that. We made up a little bit in January of people who had followed up after the mail disruption ended, but it was still a reduction for us. And,
Okay.
I'm sure others, I see Mohammed's nodding his head in agreement that it impacts our operations.
You do not want to see another postal strike.
No. A lot of people's checks too, like income for a lot of individuals, still come in checks.
Still come in checks.
Yeah,
Right.
and they don't receive it on time, or it's delayed, so it delays everything in their life and put them behind.
Right.
So it affects everybody, definitely.
We're joined now on the line by Nick Kelly, Director of the Food Bank at the Single Parents Association. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Tell me a little bit about what the profile of your food bank looks like right now at this time of year, and if you can, compare it to past years.
We are a single parent association, and our food bank there is primarily set up to support and help feed the families. That's in particular with the children. We are in very good shape at the present time. I get surprised all the time with the goodness and the support that we receive from so many people. It's just amazing. Like most often, we only hear all the bad news on the news, but people's horn don't get sounded loud enough at all for all the good that they do. And we are doing such a good job because of the support that we're getting from the public and just from the general population who are coming to support us on a regular basis, which is just amazing.
You're getting support from private citizens, and are you getting corporate support as well?
Yes, we do get some corporate support, but the private citizens who are repeat donors, who are regular all the time, who are coming, with their little bit of items or some with a lot of items, and they're just continuously supporting us all the time, and those are the people that really make the difference.
How busy is it there? You stock the shelves, and how quickly does the food fly off the shelves?
Our demand is excessive all the time. As you are aware that it's just getting harder and harder on people to live. When we look in terms of some recent statistics, about 1 in 5 Canadians have the need to use a food bank. Like, that's a tremendous number, and it's for that reason that all food banks are so very busy. And in those 1 in 5, a lot of them are working people. Some of them who had good professions and they're retired, but their lives change and things change for them. But those are really alarming statistics. And for us, we're supporting the single families, the single moms, single dads, because we are there for the children. And our demands are excessive there all the time. And we are doing our utmost to support them, because we feel strongly that no child should have to get up hungry in the morning, and no child should have to go to school hungry. And for that reason, we work diligently to try to meet every demand that's there for us.
Do your clients include people who are working full time, but whatever their earnings, they still can't make ends meet in this economy?
Yes. As long our criteria is that we support single families, single mom or single dad. So if they are working, and some of them, would you believe, some of them are working 2 jobs, and they're still trying to make a go, and just still trying it very difficult. And I have to say, for the majority of my families, it's just a perfect storm every day. If it's not something to deal with a car issue, it's something to do with school, it's something to do with high electricity bills. It's just really, really difficult on them.
Well, they're very fortunate, at least, that you're able to offer the services that you provide at the food bank there. So thanks very much for telling us about it today.
Good. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
That is Nick Kelly, Director of the Food Bank at the Single Parents Association. Rudy, does some of that sound familiar to you? Do you see similar clients at the Emmaus House Food Bank?
Absolutely, and I've spoken to people who had people donate to their food banks 10 years ago who are now coming to their food banks today. That's with the changing landscape, as Paul referenced, where rent is going up and the expense, well, all expenses are going up. Happily, we're able to meet our need. That's what makes us, is really gratifying for us, is that we can meet our need. It's a challenge, and we have some people who do buying for us. I joke that their names are posted in stores where eggs are on sale on Wednesday. They're not permitted in anymore. And, we have community food sharing who are really helpful to us, not just in coordinating eligibility, but also in providing food for us and in supporting our program.
Does Emmaus House have paid staff, or is it all volunteer?
We're totally volunteer. We're all volunteer. We have our board is made up of people from the churches that comprise Emmaus House, and from that board, then we elect an executive, and no, we have no paid staff whatsoever. And we reached to one point where we were wondering if we would have the paid staff, and the consensus was that would take the spirit out of the place, out of Emmaus House.
Mohammed, you're working at Connections for Seniors as the executive director. Do you have, is most of the work there done by staff, or do you rely a lot on volunteers?
It depends which program. So we carry roughly about 12 programs. One of them is actually related to food banks and food delivery for seniors. Our food delivery is done by volunteers. We rely on roughly about 60 volunteers a year. That's without seasons and the end of the year. Usually we can accumulate like 300-400 people. Corporate sends groups and they volunteer with us in the last couple of months of the year. But for food delivery, it's mostly about 80% done by volunteers. So we deliver roughly about anywhere between 200 to 600 a week, a month for meals and food hampers. So we partner with food banks. We pick up the hampers. We deliver it to the seniors' home. Especially in wintertime, it's a really well-needed service. It's something that we see a lot. One of our staff had to pick up the hampers a couple of weeks ago, and they said it was about an hour waiting outside in the snow. I can't believe a volunteer or a senior will stand in that cold, in that lineup for about an hour to pick up a hamper. And it's no fault of anybody. It's just the demand is so high. But for us, it makes a lot of sense for one day to collect 15, 20 hamper, deliver it to people, rather than having 20 people lining up in front of food bank trying to pick up their food for the whole month.
Right.
So yeah, it's a mix. We have roughly about 60 staff now, and all around the year, we roughly have about 300 volunteers.
Tina, does the Community Food Sharing Association rely on volunteer and staff, a mix?
We do have a mix. We actually have 5 full-time staff and 1 part-time. So there's 3 in the office and 2 and a part-time at the warehouse. And besides that, then we rely on volunteers. So we have upwards to 200 volunteers that we can call on when we need to have extra people come in.
And what's the profile like at the gathering place, Paul? You have staff and volunteers both, right?
We do, yeah. And similar to Mohammed's operation, we're 24/7, 365, and in our daytime services, we could have 100 people in our building at any given time. So we run right now at about we're at about 110 employees. So that includes full time, and we also have casual employees and part-time employees. It's about half of them are full-time, a little bit more than half are full-time. And we have 200 regular volunteers. So we have, the Tuesday lunch group that come in and work side by side with our staff, the Sunday morning breakfast group, and so on. The other thing we do is we rely on support from the corporate community and volunteer groups, the Lions Clubs and Rotary Clubs and so on. And we have a program called the Meals on Me. We have organizations that will come in and help pay for the cost of a meal for the day, and then they actually help to come in and prepare it. So Ocean Choice, as an example, has been a long time partner of ours, providing protein, fish for one meal a week.
And then the staff will come in and help dish it out.
They send a staff group in from a fish plant, or if they have an offshore vessel in for a day, the captain and the newest one on lead hand or newest hand on deck, they'll come side by side, peeling vegetables and doing those kinds of things to help prepare a meal. But it's a constant. You can't stop because we're serving those 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, and so we have to continue. We also rely on the Food Sharing Association. We have 2 food sharing days, Wednesday afternoons and Friday afternoons, where the Food Sharing Association provides products that we can share with our guests who take them home. As I mentioned, most of our guests are daytime visiting guests. And we also have other corporate donors from grocery stores and so on that help supply us for those food sharing days.
Okay. We're joined on the line now by Joshua Smee, CEO of Food First NL. Good afternoon.
Hi, Jamie, and hey, everybody. Nice to have this show. I've been listening in.
Hey, Josh.
Josh, I take it that in the job you're in, you're always keeping tabs on the food bank profile, shall we say, in the province. And is it fair to say that part of your mandate is to seek the long-term solutions that will help make us less reliant on those emergency services?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. So, for folks who've been listening into this show, we're hearing, I heard Mohammed say, and I think this is exactly right, that frontline services, almost every one of them you ask, their demand has doubled in recent years, right? And obviously that's not sustainable. We can't double and then double again and double again. There's got to be a way out of this, and the way out of this is through sort of bigger picture policy change. And one thing that is, I think, really encouraging right now is that there's a pretty strong consensus about what that policy change should look like, and there is progress being made. I would say it's too slow, but it is happening for sure.
I guess that puts me to mind of recent news about Canada-U.S. relations and the campaigns that have started up to ask people to buy Canadian, buy local, and I guess we should add to that we should be doing more grow local, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion about tariffs has surfaced some really important things. It's surfaced how vulnerable our access to food is, and so part of the mix here absolutely is reducing that dependence in ways that make sense. But you also have to think about one of the reasons we're vulnerable to this situation is that people are in a really rough place coming into this, right? So, 1 in 4 people in this province are food insecure. And maybe even, I would say, more worrying is that 1 in 11 are severely food insecure, which is a fancy way of saying they're going hungry, right? And that's the highest rate of severe food insecurity of any Canadian province. And so when I look at what's happening around the tariffs and the impact on our food systems, it's going to push prices up, and that's going to push more people into those circumstances. And so I think one of the really important things is thinking about responding to the tariffs is not just supporting shifts in who produces food, but also in supporting the people who need to eat the food, because otherwise we're going to be in a really difficult situation.
With this big picture view that you take on it, partly as the mandate of your job, does it seem overwhelming at times? Because it does seem as though food banks, which were, I think, originally intended just to help people through tough times when they find themselves living on the margin, are all of a sudden sort of a crucial cog in our food network, and that's not the way it should be.
No, it's not. It does feel overwhelming at times. I was saying to someone yesterday that it feels right now like we're on a huge ship. We've got some huge rocks in front of us, and the ship is just starting to turn, but it's not turning fast enough. That we know what the levers are to fix this, right? This is a problem, but it's not a mystery. That's not something we don't understand how to solve. But what we are not doing is moving fast enough to solve it. And so, yeah, it does feel intimidating day to day. I think for folks who are doing this work, even getting people together for conversations like this and having some solidarity between the people who are doing the work on the ground is a really important part of how to keep going, and we have a lived and living experience advisory group. So that's a group of folks who are food insecure right now. And, they also say that what they want to see is these big picture system changes and no more Band-Aids, and I think that's really something important to think about is, how do we take that public spirit that gets so upset about this and donates and contributes and volunteers and extend that to, maybe pushing your MP or your MHA a bit harder on these big picture causes.
Let's finish on a positive note. What are the kinds of things that you see and the signs that you see in the system when you've had a good day on the job?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. Credit where credit's due. Our province is making some progress on poverty reduction policies. So, for example, the Canada Disability Benefit is kicking in June, July. That's a national one. It's $200 a month. That's not very much. It's not going to be a huge help. But Newfoundland and Labrador, folks are going to get an additional $400 on top of that. And so for some folks with disabilities, for example, their income is going to go up by 50% overnight. That is going to push a lot of people out of the most severe food insecurity. So we do have these wins happening. And we have an all-party committee that's been studying basic income that's going to report soon. We have a lot of action on that nationally. PEI is really leading the way. There really is a lot of change moving. And so there's lots of places to look for examples of what those policies could look like for sure.
Thanks so much for joining the conversation today. It was great to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and thanks to everyone in the room for all that you're doing. It's incredible work.
That is Joshua Smee, CEO of Food First NL. We're speaking to him just on the line now. And we are actually coming down to the closing minutes of this show. There is not much left, but I'd like to get a closing thought from each of you. I have to ask you to keep it kind of short, but Mohammed, why don't you start?
We have been through hard times in the last 5 years. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. I think if we stick to working together, if we stick to collaboration and not having any barriers between government and community and the service recipients, I think we will have really swift and good solutions. We already have some good solutions. There's some more to achieve. But as long as we keep those channels open, I think we will be able to achieve things faster and more effective.
Rudy, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Yes, hope springs eternal, Jamie, and at Emmaus House, we're all really gratified by the enthusiasm and the commitment of all of our volunteers, and their aim, we're all pulling on the same oar, is to help people as much as possible, and I suppose our collective aim would be to make food banks unnecessary, but while they are necessary, we're going to endeavour in every way to be there to help.
Paul, from the perspective of the Gathering Place, do you have any final thoughts for us? We can only give you, less than a minute.
Every time the economy is hit by something else, talks of tariffs, exchange rate changes, the economy moves, it increases the number of people coming to the Gathering Place. Those who are on the fringes, and we heard this comment throughout the last hour, those who are on the fringes get pushed to more reliability. I can't provide lunch to my family 7 days this week, so 2 days we're going to go to the Gathering Place to try and make ends meet. That only continues to increase. As I said earlier, we rely on the kindness of others. Any support financially or volunteers, groups and organizations, we can put you to work to help us in our efforts to help others.
Okay. Tina, what's the message from the Community Food Sharing Association?
Well, first of all, we would like to take this opportunity to thank our donors. Without you, we would not be able to do what we do. So we're very grateful for that. And ultimately, our goal is to make sure that no one in this province goes hungry. Again, I stress to you that if you're able to get out and support your local food banks to help those in your communities.
Tina Bishop, General Manager of the Community Food Sharing Association. Rudy Singleton, is Chairperson of Emmaus House Food Bank. Paul Davis, Executive Director of the Gathering Place. And Mohammed Abdullah, Executive Director of Connections for Seniors. They've all joined me in the studio today. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you for
Thanks for the invitation.
That is it for today's show. Please remember that previous episodes of The Signal are always available on the CBC Listen app and the CBC Newfoundland and Labrador YouTube channel. So if you know of someone else who you think ought to hear the message in this show, you can always share it with them. If you want to add your thoughts on our conversation today, send an email to thesignal@cbc.ca or leave us a voicemail at 709-576-5260. We gather all your contributions, we read and listen to them all, and we will present some of them on a future episode of the show. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick, in today for Adam Walsh. Thanks so much for listening to The Signal. Have a great rest of your day.